welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and wrestling's premier photojournalist, Mike Lano. And we have a very, very special guest tonight, and that is, I should introduce you as Kelly Slaughter, the daughter of Sergeant Slaughter. Thank you so much for being on this show tonight. I just got to say that if I had a bucket list of people that I wanted to talk to, obviously it'd be your father, but talking to you is almost as good because I've seen all your wonderful posts on Facebook and I love them all. And so you have a very interesting life all your own, not independent of your father, but I'm sure you'll be able to tell us a lot of great stories about your father as well. We hold him in very high esteem. And I just wanted to share this one quick thing with you. And that is here. This is in 2000. I was with Sergeant Slaughter over at the Cauliflower Alley Club. And your father spent a good lot of time talking to me and listening to me. And he was not only was it one of the highlights of the Cauliflower Alley Club meeting that I was at, it was one of my life highlights because I've always admired your father.
I've been Cauliflower Alley's board photographer since 1987. I don't think I took that picture, but...
No, you did not. No, you did not. It's one of the few pictures I have that you didn't take, Mike. But yes, it's he was very congenial to me, really a wonderful gentleman, and I look back on that conversation I had with your father with tremendous fondness. So you can tell him 22 years later he influenced somebody, and he was really nice. I talked to him about the Grand Wizard and what it was like for him to have a manager, because I was just starting out as a manager at that point, and what it was like to transition from being a guy that didn't work with a manager to a guy that did work with a manager, and also about other things in his career. But let me also have you talk about yourself and tell us all about what you're up to right now, currently.
All right. Well, I actually just this morning, did a DECA Fit. Well, a DECA Strong. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Spartan races or anything like that, but a DECA Fit, it's basically, there's 10 zones that you go through. It's functional fitness, at burpees, rowing machines, the ski erg, step overs, farmer's carry. I mean, it was a lot, and I definitely went in there thinking it was going to be easier than it actually was, only because it was so hot. It was miserably hot.
Where was this?
Where are you? You don't have to say the city, but what state are you?
I'm in the Carolinas.
Oh, okay.
Where the Bugs have first and last names.
Yeah, well, your dad had all that history in Mid-Atlantic and the Charlotte for the Crockett's, obviously.
Yeah. I'm in a suburb of Charlotte.
And is this thing that you're doing, is it sort of like a triathlon? Is it a personal or a group challenge? And are you an athlete yourself? How did this go beyond like mere physical fitness?
Right. Well, I would say I am an athlete now, doing these training for these Spartans that I have to do. Or I don't have to do them. I love to do them, and I have fun doing them. But I actually started a fitness journey really a couple years ago, right when the pandemic happened, maybe a little bit before. I've lost 125 pounds.
Wow, good for you.
Thank you. And just from going to the gym, I met, you become friends with people that are regulars at the gym. When you become a regular at the gym, these people all the time, and you're doing fitness together and encouraging each other. And they asked me to do a Spartan. And at first I said no. I'm like, there's no way I could do a Spartan. You're crazy. And they were like, you can do it. You could do it. And then I said no. And then they asked me again. And then they just kept asking. And then I finally caved and said, fine, I'll do it. And then I fell in love with it.
It sounds tougher than a triathlon because there's way more components, right?
Well, the one I started with was called a sprint, because there's different levels of a Spartan race. And the one I started with was a sprint. It's a 5K with 20 obstacles that you have to do, various obstacles. Climbing a rope, um, crawling through mud, which, over a hill and into muddy water, and then back over a muddy hill, and under walls, and swimming, and running, because it's a 5K. I jumped over fire right before I got to cross the finish.
Yes.
So, you feel pretty, like a pretty bad A. I don't know if I
How
can.
long does this take? Is this over a day or more than a day?
Well, I was with a pretty large team of people, and we all waited for each other, and, we didn't take it all that seriously. And I think it took us, the 5K, it was 2.5 or 3 hours, I think it took us. So, but what
and by the way, Kelly, I have 2 kids, but Mike swears all the time on this show. So
okay.
No, I will not swear in the presence of Sarge's daughter, who a great friendship. Speaking of Cauliflower Alley, twice he's given me a ride in his limo to the airport when the thing is all over on Wednesdays.
Nice.
Years past.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
Much respect to him. I didn't even know. I don't know his personal life. Are you his only his child, or are there more?
Sure. I have an older sister. Her name is Nicole.
And does she enjoy the limelight of being Sergeant Slaughter's daughter as much as you do? You seem like that's your thing.
She enjoys being his daughter, but she doesn't want to be in the limelight.
And tell me what growing up with Sergeant Slaughter was like. What it's like to have a dad as a pro wrestler. That's a very famous pro wrestler, I might add.
Yes, he is. He was a wrestler before I was born, and he was Sarge before I was born. So I don't know any different. And we definitely got a lot of perks. Sorry. I have something on my face here. A hair stuck to my lip. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's the beauty of semi-live.
Yes.
I guess I might be able to edit it.
Were you born when he was Sarge and working with Don Kernodle in Charlotte, against Steamboat and Youngblood and all of that stuff? Were you old enough to recall it, or were you just being born about that time?
Don Kernodle was my Uncle Don. So I remember, of course, my Uncle Don, and I remember all of those names, and I know I've met all of them. But I was young. I was born in 1979. So he was already Sarge.
He was already in the Tri-WF, I think, working for Vince Sr. then.
Yeah.
Which was, the sort of the pinnacle of the career. And wow.
So continue on telling us what it was like to grow up in that household.
Yes. So he did not bring Sarge home. My mom made it very clear that you're not Sarge when you walk through these doors. So you leave Sarge at the arena, and you're Bob and your daddy, when you come home, your dad to these girls, and we're your family. And, my mom was not going to allow Sarge in that house to order us around, but we did go to events with him, and charity events. And I remember going to hospitals with him and visiting kids in the hospital, and Goofy Games. He did that a couple times down in Disney World, and we all got to go, and all the perks that we got to see. As a little kid, I didn't know that wasn't what everybody's experience was at Disney. You know what I mean? Like, I had no idea. So then when I went and I wasn't with my dad, I was like, whoa, this is a totally different thing going on here. But obviously I still have a good time. It's Disney World. How could you not? But It's just funny. It's like, what do you mean I can't use the private tunnel to go back?
Wow, so you got to like go to like the like behind the scenes stuff because wow, that's great. Did your dad really like the ability to be able to be treated like that and go to special places and stuff? Because your dad, to me, having met him, seemed very humble and very like down to earth and not like the kind of guy that.
I think he's that way at all, but you would know best. But he never struck me as anybody that would want to be on.
Yeah,
that.
big time people. He never big time people. You know, his reputation has always been someone that has visited kids in the hospital. He always made time for his fans, and he seemed to genuinely like when people would react to him positively. And I that not every wrestler is like that.
Yeah. He's always been very appreciative of his fans, always. He knows that without his fans, he wouldn't be where he is today. He wouldn't have been where he was then. One of my favorite pictures of my dad, I actually found it, I think on eBay, and it was a print of, they were putting all of their prints into digital form and they were selling it. It was a newspaper or something. It was from back in the 80s. And all you see is my dad's hat, his glasses, and his mustache, because his head is kind of down in a downward position. And there's a sea of people around him. A sea of people. Like you can't, but you know it's him because it's his campaign cover, it's his glasses, and it's his mustache. So if you see any of my dad's merchandise that he has a shirt that has the hat and the sunglasses and the mustache, and I designed that.
Wow.
Yeah, I designed that for his birthday.
That is one
for him, and we gave out those shirts.
Let me tell you what kind of guy he is, which is very meaningful, and it brings a lot of things together. Way before Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard, managed him, when he was starting out, and it was after his stint we were talking about earlier, where he was doing like a surfer, kind of a superstar Billy Graham gimmick, like Hulk Hogan and Jesse Ventura would also do the same thing. But this was in Kansas City for Bob Geigel, and he appeared on some Kiel Auditorium shows for the whole NWA president, Sam Muchnick. But then when he went to the AWA and he was working under a hood, a mask, as the Super Destroyer Mark, I don't know if it was Mark II.
Yeah.
Don Jardine, and then there was another guy who would later work under a hood for Vince Sr., but Lord Al Hayes managed him as both a heel and a face. And they, anyway, at several Cauliflower Alleys, I think it was 2001 and 2002 and maybe 3, he was in charge of Al Hayes in the wheelchair. And your dad took such tender, loving care of Al Hayes, as you probably know, even more than I do. But I saw him there, throughout the 3+ days, always taking care of, his former manager and good buddy, because, many of us remember Al Hayes not as the buffoonish Lord Al Hayes, but I shot him in '73 in England when he was Judo Al Hayes, working with shooter hooker wrestlers, the very best, like Billy Robinson and Mick McManus and those guys. So to see your dad doing that, and just the genuine friendship and love between these guys until Al Hayes. So can you tell us some of that? Do you know about your dad? I don't know if Al Hayes was living in Florida or in the Carolinas near your dad, or.
I don't know where he was living at the time that you're talking about, but I know for a time he did live in Connecticut. But Lord Alfred Hayes and my dad were great friends. He very fondly called my dad Matthew, because when my dad would check into hotels or motels, he would use a alias, and his alias was Matt Burns.
Uh-huh.
And so Alfred, because my dad says it's because he was English and he spoke proper English and he didn't use nicknames. Instead of calling him Matt, he would call him Matthew. And so that name just stuck. And it's funny because somebody tagged me in a post about my dad. And when I went to that post, there was a woman that had commented and said something about my dad, but she called him Matthew. And I was like, if she's calling him Matthew, I said, what is her name? And I looked again, and her middle name was Hayes.
Yeah.
And if you're calling him Matthew, you have to be Lord Alfred Hayes' daughter. And it sure was. So it was really nice to kind of run into her that way, because we were around each other a lot. I was very young, but because my dad and Alfred were around each other a lot.
Well,
so we connected her.
Yeah, no, that's now I hate to make this show about myself, because I am so glad to have you on here, but for psycho stalker reasons, I have to admit a couple things. One is, I used to have a Cobra Corps t-shirt from the AWA that I used to wear proudly until it was stolen in my college laundry. It was the Salta and Asanume at Kappa Nomine, like in a circle, and it had a big cobra in the middle. And I used to just, people used to comment about it all the time, and I love the heck out of that shirt. Second thing is that when I was a hacker back in my early days of Atari 800 piracy, I actually used the name Sergeant Slaughter as my hacker name. So right. I was known in the San Francisco Bay Area as Sergeant Slaughter. Yes, I'm sorry. This is confessional time. And then I went to every match that your father had, either in San Diego or Sacramento or San Francisco, and one in Los Angeles, because I was such a fan of watching him work. His high point being a tag team match that he had with Kurt and Larry Hennig in the Cow Palace in a cage against the Road Warriors and Paul Ellering. And you were, I think, 5 or 6 years old when that happened. Absolutely the bloodiest match I think I've ever seen.
Let's ask, did you go on the road? Because we've heard, and I know Ashley Flair, who wrestles as Charlotte, which is great because they're paying honor to the city that made Flair and Steamboat and your father and so many others. That was one of the greatest territories of all time, and I'm a territory guy. I've been shooting wrestling for MMA and boxing for all our genre magazines around the world since 1966. All the territories, lots of Japan tours. I wasn't on the one. I can only recall one All Japan tour, but I'm pretty sure your dad worked for New Japan for Inoki. But the All Japan one would have been for Giant Baba, and that would have been between his NWA and AWA days. But I'm just asking, we were talking about your experiences with your dad, but it was rough on lots of children when their father was away. Did you experience that? Because I would, knowing your father the little bit that I could say I did, I would think he would make that a priority to not have that be like a Flair thing where he's the world champion, never home, never seen his kids grow up. I tend to think he probably was there more for you guys. It's tough being a child of a wrestler or any kind of celebrity or what have you. That's why celebrities, real big ones, Rock Hudson, Doris Day, they would use fake names checking into hotels just as your dad did. But did you experience that or something different than other kids of wrestlers?
I did not go on the road with my dad. I was home with my mom and my sister. And my dad was gone all the time. He was gone for months when he went to Japan. He went to Japan twice. And both times he was gone for a long time. What I remember the most about that time, because again, I was young, I remember a jewelry box he brought me home and kimono that I still have and my daughter wears now, because she's probably around the age that I was when he was there. But we did go to a couple shows, but not until I was a little bit older. And when we did go, the Iron Sheik and him were wrestling. And the Iron Sheik had a weapon and he kept moving the weapon from his belt to his boot, and the ref was checking his belt and his boot, but never when the weapon was in his belt and his boot. And my sister and I just freaked out because we were like, he's going to kill our dad and we're going to have to sit here and watch this happen. And my mom, took my sister out. I think maybe for some reason I wanted to stay, but I don't think I watched. And then when the match was over and he was leaving the ring, I don't remember this, but he says that I tugged on his arm and was like, "Daddy," and he was like, "Oh, Kelly," and brought me back stage. And he said my mom was standing there with my sister holding her going, I cannot believe you. And he was like, I didn't know Sheik was going to do that. I had no idea he was doing that. So.
Did he smarten you guys up? Because most wrestlers that were observing kayfabe and all that stuff, and now it's a different era, but I go back, again to the 60s, and they never smartened up. They kind of did perhaps with the wives, but definitely not their kids until they were at least 21. So did you get that to at least he could tell you, hey, you might see daddy in situations, but don't worry because it's like dancing. You have a dance partner and we're not really hurting each other. We're protecting the other guy at the same time they're protecting us.
I think he told me that he did not wise us up to the business until we were a little bit older. I was younger than 21 for sure. I was still in middle school. It was probably around the time that he went and became the Iraqi sympathizer. Is probably when he was like, now I need to tell you.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. How did it feel like, because your dad had been such a hero for so long, for him to become really one of the most hated people in the United States, not just, in wrestling,
but he was
but in the United States.
G.I. Joe with all that history, the cartoon show, the action figures, and then this thing.
He had presidents tell him that they stood up and did the Pledge of Allegiance while watching him do the Pledge of Allegiance on TV. He represented America. And so for him to turn like that, I totally get why. I totally get now why people wanted to kill all of us. He got death threats. We got death threats. People come in and kill his family and to kill him, of course, to bomb the WWE offices, to go after Vince. It was definitely not an easy time for us. He had to wrestle in a bulletproof vest numerous times. As you know, they had to change the location of WrestleMania.
I was there. It was supposed to be at the outdoor. It wasn't supposed to be at the outdoor Coliseum. They moved it to the sports arena.
I'm not sure exactly where, but I know it was. I think you're right. It was an outdoor space.
That was the LA Coliseum where the USC Trojans and the LA Rams had played. So they had collegiate and then professional teams playing there. So it seats, the way it could be configured, up to 106,000.
Yeah. So they couldn't do it there. They had to go to wherever was the other place they brought it.
That was the sports arena, where they had better security, tighter security. One thing,
your father was able to win the WWF championship. So how did that feel like for him, that he was able to finally, sort of as a career accomplishment, become the WWF champion and a significant one for historically? How did that feel for your father?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never asked him that. You would have to ask him that.
Get him on the show for us.
Let me ask you then, seeing this insane business, really insane business, it's insane on a daily, if not weekly basis. have you had any aspirations, or what has been your, what do you do, like both, maybe you don't have to say as a career, but are you in TV? Are you in, what do you do? If you can tell us.
I have a YouTube channel, Slaughter Daughter Official. And I basically, vlog or video podcast with my dad. And I've been after my dad. We all have been after my dad to write a book for a really long time.
Yeah.
He has not done it. He, I think he wants to do it, but I don't think he wants to really take the time to really sit down and think about it. And he actually really wanted to sit down with some of his friends, like Don Kernodle, and record conversations that they would have talking about things. Because he was like, Don will bring up something that I completely forgot about, but as you guys know, Don passed away last year. So I was just like, you know what? He needs his stories out, and we're going to do it this way. So.
And then somebody can transcribe it. Most wrestlers, I did one book so far with Johnny Valentine called Rib. And it was nothing. I had to give him a tape recorder, micro cassette for 2 years. He'd recount all these insane ribs that he did in the 50s and 60s. And now I'm working with Abdullah the Butcher. But you just need somebody, and they do all the grunt work. And the subject, this case, your father, might just be interviewed. So it's not as time consuming for the actual talent as it is, the other person has to do the big time work, like a Scott Teal, who has his own publishing outfit. He's done a number of incredible books, J.J. Dillon and Ole Anderson and Tony Atlas, who worked with your dad for years and years. But you doing this, that's like almost the next best thing. It's like shoot interview type stuff and recalling these things. And your dad's a regular presence, I think. For a long time, the guy's name, I think, is Greg Price, who put on these annual Charlotte reunions. And it didn't just have to be guys that worked there. It could be, from other great territories. But the Rock and Roll Express, all of the Four Horsemen with Flair and Arn and Tully and all that would come in there. Have you gone to a lot of those? Because probably a ton of big name book authors and publishers, even ECW Press is probably the biggest one today. And I'm sure Mike Holmes might assign somebody to do that if you're at all interested. Because WWE used to have the Simon and Schuster book deal, but that's gone now.
Yeah, he's been approached many times. Even I, since starting the YouTube channel, I get people messaging me offering to help out with writing a book for him. He just.
Well, we'd all love to hear it. I just want to.
Wait, Russ, one thing, because I've taken pictures of him at a lot of charity golf events. What type of golfer is he, and do you also golf with him, or?
I do not golf, and he is actually a really good golfer, although I don't think he's golfed in quite some time. He just doesn't have the time or the want to do it anymore. I think it was hard on his body. So he's not golfing anymore.
It aggravates the injuries he had in the ring. Tell us about the podcast. So how many episodes have you done? How long have you guys been doing it?
I just started the beginning of the year. There's 9 videos up there now. We just did a live double feature with a friend of mine named Zazel, and he runs a YouTube channel called Sergeant Slaughter Slaughterhouse, which is you find anything Sergeant Slaughter at
and that's how I got connected to you and to Wayne Matai is through Zazel. So yes, he's an interesting character.
Yeah,
definitely. But your episodes are totally charming, by the way. I tell anyone that's a fan, if they like this podcast, go check out your podcast, because you and your dad are, I wish me and my daughter could do something like that had that kind of interaction.
There's nobody in wrestling, father-daughter. I've not heard of anybody. Everybody's got a podcast, from Chris Jericho to Jim Ross. and I think Bruce Pritchard and obviously Tom Pritchard, all these guys your dad knows, but there's nobody on the planet doing a father-daughter wrestler, to my knowledge.
I've never researched it. I really just did this kind of on a whim, and I did it because of Zazel. He asked me to be on his podcast, and I said, sure, why not? And it just kind of went from there. And I ended up being like, you know what? If I can get my dad to talk and, do this with me, we can get his stories out there. And that's really my whole, again, going back to not writing a book. I really, want him to get his stories out there. I don't want them, he's not getting any younger, and I don't want them to disappear, because he has great stories to tell, and he's a really good storyteller.
He is. From having met him, he absolutely is. There's an interesting dichotomy to your dad, is that, he was able to, be in front of millions of people and be Sergeant Slaughter and be such a dominating force in the ring. But outside of the ring, he's very low key and very mild, and seems like he's almost awkward with the publicity that it generates. Although he understands why we're all fans, it's just there's kind of an aw shucks thing about your father. That like
he's a real dude. He's not like all consumed.
And so there's sort of this weird dichotomy, because when he turns on his character, I mean, it was something that really, in the age of kayfabe, we all really believed in, and so.
Russ, but
I'm sorry.
Let's ask her about the podcast. So you've done 9. Why don't you tell us about tell us about them so far, because it's hard to get somebody like him to open up. So a daughter could definitely do that. That's very unique.
Yes. So, last night we did the double feature with Zazel at Sergeant Slaughterhouse, and we talked about the Montreal Screwjob. He was there. He was ringside with Vince, and he was backstage in the locker room when everything went down. So he told his side of the story of what happened.
Because a lot of people don't know, he was office like a Pat Patterson or Jerry Briscoe. He was office for many, many years. I don't know, on off. I don't know if he's on a Legends deal or he's still part, with things happening there now. They're in need of experienced guys, and hopefully in terms of script writers, we'll go back to the wrestlers, the talent, the boys and girls, as opposed to, ex soap opera writers that don't have that passion for the business. And
right.
But tell us about these. So, again, more about the episodes, because it's who could bring out more than a child stuff from their dad? So is he like shooting big time, or is he still a bit reserved because he's old school and may not want to divulge everything to the general public?
He got pretty heated last night. Talking about Undertaker, Mark Calaway.
In a good way, about like the documentary that just aired 2 weeks ago, or?
He was a little upset with Mark Calaway.
Wow.
Like he kind of went off a little.
Well, that's a good tease to drive viewers to say. Now, I want you to talk about the episodes, but I hope you're talking about one of the greatest MSG or Tri-WF matches ever. In Tri-WF, WWF, WWE, the bunkhouse thing with he and Pat Patterson, people still say it was the greatest match, not just in Madison Square Garden, but overall. And then the cool thing about him and Iron Sheik was the way your dad turned from horrific heel villain, just walking past Iron Sheik Khosrow, Crazy Khosrow, on TV. They just walked past each other, and that turned Sergeant Slaughter into babyface, because I guess they had like a millisecond of words, and he had just had a match where the fans booed and wanted to kill him. I think that was whatever year that was, 82 or 83. And then the thing with Khosrow. So that was an amazing feud. But the Pat Patterson, the bunkhouse thing, have you done a whole show on that? Because I could see him talking a good 2 hours.
So is that a different match than the alley match?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. The Pat Patterson, the alley one that was insane.
Yeah. We've touched on it a little bit. I did ask him what his favorite match was, and he said that match.
Nice.
We talk about a lot of things. We talk about music. You know, we don't just talk about wrestling. We talk about the music that we like.
Wait, so what music do you guys both agree that you like? What music What music do you guys both like that you've discussed then?
We like the Eagles. We like classic rock.
Wow, I didn't know if you're.
I like a pretty good range of music, but yeah, we have a whole show about music and road trips and the music that we will listen to on road trips together and be tortured by classic country songs.
Who are some of his favorite country stars then? Like George Strait or?
He liked all the classics and Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson. And he also liked Vince Gill and the Judds and Garth Brooks, of course. So yeah, I had to listen to all of that. I'm not a big country fan. I do appreciate all of those artists now, but I just can't. I'm a rock and roll girl, and I like reggae music. I call it California reggae. But yeah, that's what, like Sublime and Pepper and Revolution and Stick Figure is my favorite.
Nice.
Not Gwen Stefani, who's taken some ska and reggae in her earliest.
Yeah, they all like came from the same area, Sublime and Gwen, and No Doubt. And there's she does a song with them, with Sublime. So yeah, it's the same.
That's where I am. I'm in Orange County right now of Southern California. And I'll throw back to Russ that one of my best friends is Chris Christopherson's wrestling son, Jody, who had to quit after 2 neck injuries, but he actually trained at the promotion that I was the photographer for and Russ was a heel manager for, All Pro Wrestling in Northern California. And Jody's wrestled for a number of years, but his dad, who has the place in Maui and Santa Barbara, would always come in for his matches with his current wife, Lisa, and support him. And so the audience would go out of their minds, but it never detracted, having somebody like Chris Christopherson there, this huge, country and easy rock. He's done a lot of genres, having somebody like that there. So, and even the kid that's on the All Elite Wrestling competition to WWE, Jungle Boy's, his father, Luke Perry, who was the actor, not a musician really, although he did cut 1 record. But so there's a lot of kids, because wrestling is so popular, due to
actor.
Yeah, Luke Perry from 90210. His son
Dylan.
Dylan. Yeah. And he's a big deal now with a former WWE star, Christian, feuding with him. So there's, because of people like your dad that transcended everything, like an Elvis Presley or what have you, from entertainment, all of these children of actors love wrestling more than what their parents do and wanted to get into it. So it's kind of cool. And that's worldwide, not just limited to the US and Canada.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever been tempted to get in the ring? That we've sort of danced around the idea there, but have you ever wanted to do wrestling yourself?
I did want to be a wrestler. When I first found out that my dad was a wrestler, I wanted to be a wrestler because I idolized my dad. My dad was and still is my hero. And wanted to do what he was doing. And to me, the women that I saw in the WW at the time was Elizabeth. It was Arm Candy. There was Sensational Sherry, but I think she came a little bit later. And I didn't want to be the arm candy. I wanted to be fighting the boys. I wanted to be wrestling the men and kicking their ass. And I wanted to be doing what my dad was doing. And there was no one like, I didn't see that. And there was Glow, but they weren't fighting the boys. They were fighting each other. And to me, even as a little girl, I saw it more as a funny thing. Like, to me, it wasn't serious. It was more campy than it was anything else. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Glow.
No, Glow, they only had 3 weeks of training. So
Right.
for actresses, they trying to do a spoof of WWF at the time. It was not
Right.
like other stuff. But did you get to see, I think the first woman in WWF who around 97 who ever wrestled guys was Jacqueline, the African-American female wrestler. And Lita did to a certain extent too, Amy Dumas.
I remember China.
Yeah,
Is who I
definitely Joni.
remember Lita. I remember Jacqueline. I was not watching it at that time, though. I was not, to be honest with you, I was not a fan of wrestling. I think because my dad didn't want me to be a wrestler. So when I was all, I'm going to be a wrestler when I grow up, he was like, no, you're not. No, you're not.
What was his rationale for that? He just didn't, because he knew how difficult and.
He didn't want the wrestler's life for me. He just didn't want that. He knew what it was like, and he didn't want that for me. And he kept my sister and I away a little bit from wrestling for that reason. My sister really wasn't into it. I was definitely more so into wrestling than my sister was. And then I don't know what happened. It just kind of, I think around the time he became the Iraqi sympathizer was when we were kind of like, you're not going to that. You know, it's not safe for you to even go. And so it just kind of put a stop to it. And we really didn't go back to any of his shows again until he was commissioner.
I was going to say, yeah, after Monsoon passed, then he took over that big role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it wasn't until then that we really got, so there's like a break that I really didn't see that much of, if that makes sense. And I really only watched when he was on when I was older.
Do you think though, if it had all been fast forwarded to where women have a much greater role today in wrestling and they do get to fight the guys every so often,
yes.
Do you think you would have been more?
I would have 100%. If I had been born just a little bit later, you know, I think 100% I would have done it.
You see The Rock's daughter now is taken intentionally. Ava Rain, I think, is her ring name, even though she's fourth generation, which Vince has always liked. It's a big deal in wrestling to be second, third, or fourth generation, like Mexico, where like nearly every kid of a wrestler, they don't have a choice. They can't go to music or design school or graphic arts or whatever. They're going to be a wrestler. But she picked that name to specifically detach so the fans wouldn't think
Get away.
Of the Anawahe, Maivia Johnson family, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Had you done that? Did you ever come up with like what your character might be, or would it be like Roddy Piper's daughter, Ariel? She simply just changed her name. I forget what she changed it to. It was like a color, like Scarlet or something, and was doing his eye poke and all of his moves. So she had no problem embracing his character, but others don't want to. They want to create their own niche all by themselves. Would you have been like?
I would have embraced it. I would be Slaughtered Otter, and I would have worn camo pants, a black tank top, a whistle, aviators.
Calling people maggots.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have managed you. That would have been fantastic. I also wanted to talk about your link with the toys, the Sergeant Slaughter toys. What's the deal going on with that?
So what do you mean, my link with them?
Well, you promote do you have stuff with collectors that you help, people who are collecting specifically?
Does Dad have a gimmick line that you help run?
I do not. I don't help him run anything. I am friends with a lot of those collectors. So because of doing YouTube and mainly through Zazel. Zazel has actually been a pretty integral part of my YouTube experience so far and the people that I've met. And so he's a collector. So a lot of his friends are collectors. So it just kind of has happened along that way.
And it's a big community. I think maybe you're
huge. I had absolutely no idea. Like, I remember seeing these videos. They spend so much time making videos. There's like stop motion. There's animated stuff. There's
Is it like Robot Chicken? If you're familiar with Adult Swim, is it like that with just action figures? Is that what we're talking about? Wrestling action figures? You can't call them dolls.
In Adult Swim.
But you never Adult Swim?
No,
That's they take action figures. They animate them, so it's like a Gumby stop motion.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's like it's not like out of clay or anything like that, but it's
these
like
are action figures, and they have celebrity voices. Seth, I forget what the guy's name is. Not Seth.
Seth Green. Seth Green.
Yeah, Seth Green does it, and he has like all of Mia Kunis and all of these famous stars. Steve Carell.
But it's all very adult. Let's also put it this way: very sarcastic, very adult.
That's why they put it on at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I've heard of it, and I remember when it first came out, people used to be like, "Kelly, you have to watch this. It's hilarious. You would love it." And I just never got around to watching it for some reason. But so I don't know. But it's I mean, it's a huge community, and it's a good community too. They all really, from my experience, seem to support each other.
Is it great to action figures or beyond wrestling action figures?
I mean, it's any kind of action figure or toy. It's a huge.
Not just limited to wrestling, because where I am every day, we're getting the news thing on San Diego Comic-Con, and it's big. Dwayne Johnson made an appearance yesterday to hype that new movie that has a load of action figures. Black Adam, that new thing that's coming out. Are you a big sci-fi Marvel DC person?
I am not.
Well, G.I. Joe had a good run in Marvel.
But your dad has come to at least one Comic-Con, is he not?
He goes to Comic-Cons all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all over the place, like Schiller Theater conventions, all of those things.
Yeah. I know all about it, and I know about Marvel and DC and everything. I mean, when I was younger, I loved Supergirl, but Wonder Woman was I loved Wonder Woman. I think I might have dressed up like her for Halloween one year.
Yeah. Not unusual. So what is your father doing now? You say he's very busy and he doesn't have time to write anything. So what is he really primarily focused on right now?
Appearances. He's been recording a movie.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You tell us something about that without divulging, or? I
believe I don't remember what it's called, and it's it's not like an A-lister movie or a huge budget movie or anything like that, but I think he plays like a coach, and it's he's like coaching a wrestler to get back. There's something, I don't know exactly. We talked about it on the podcast.
Role in Vern Gagne's The Wrestler, because wasn't Sarge, was he in the second Vern Gagne Billy Robinson class or the first one with Flair and Steamboat and Jimmy Brunzell? You remember which one?
Not sure which class he was in.
I think he was in the second one, and Vern and Billy only did 2, and nearly everybody came out of it, became somebody big, until I think that one plane crash, the Ric Flair plane crash happened, and I forget who passed away in that one, other than the pilot. And thank goodness your dad wasn't on that thing, because I think he was in the territory at the time almost.
We've talked about lots of plane crashes that he's not plane crashes, but almost plane crashes. He's got lots of scary airplane stories. But yeah, we haven't talked about that incident and I'm sure he feels the fact that he could have possibly been on there. That's a scary thought.
Because there were two within about 6 weeks of each other. There was the Bobby Shane one in Florida, and then the Charlotte Flair Johnny Valentine one.
Mm.
I forget who was on that flight that was crippled and had to quit his wrestling career. Bob Bruggers, I think, was the guy on the Flair, the Mid-Atlantic one. With all the travel that he did, does he enjoy travel? Do you guys travel? Is that not a passion of his? Or what are some of his passions now? Russ is trying to ask, what's he keeping busy with? Is he traveling even, now I guess it's a lot safer than it was 2 years ago with COVID.
Mm-hmm. He travels a lot. He does a lot of different shows and Comic-Cons, and he's doing a Comic-Con in Raleigh, GalaxyCon, I think that's coming up in the fall. No, it's the end of July. He's doing that in Raleigh. He's all over the place. I cannot keep up with his schedule. He does tell me all the time where he is, and it literally goes in one ear and out the other because he's everywhere. Last night I said he was in New York, and I was wrong. He was in Pennsylvania. So
Wow.
He's all over the place, and he continues to do it. So I think he likes to do it to a certain extent. But yeah, so he's all over the place, travels all over the place. If there's been so many times where I'll say, I really want to go to some destination. And he'll be like, oh, yeah, I was there a few times. I'll be like, really? Well, what was it like? And how come I didn't get to go? You know? And he's like, well, the airport and the hotel were nice. Because that's all he sees.
Yeah, and that brings up a topic also, is that, do you think if everything was equal, would he do it all over again the way that he's had it done? Or would he have wanted to spend more time at home, maybe not work as many shows or take semi-retirement or a fake injury so he could spend more time with you folks? Or was he, this was the way it was supposed to be for him and he never looked back? What do you think?
I've never heard him talk about regrets. So I think he is happy with the way things have turned out. I mean, I'm sure there's things that he wishes he could have, or maybe not wishes that he could do differently, but things that he could have done differently. But I've never really heard him talk about regrets in his career.
Can you, before I want to ask you about the Zeisel and then have you promote everything you want to promote. But did your mom, I know your mom that put a brunt of all of the work raising two daughters, did she have a career? What did your mom do, or what were some of her passions?
My mom helped my dad with his career, actually. He credits her to a lot of his ideas. He always ran things through her to get her opinion, and she would tell him he was crazy to do something or he was crazy not to do something. And so he credits her a lot to that and helping his character development and all of that. And but she got into sales, gift sales, and was very successful at that. But now she's retired. So she's enjoys being a grandma.
Wow.
And have you thought maybe about your daughter possibly having a future in pro wrestling?
Yeah, I've tried to see if my son has any interest in it, and he really doesn't seem that interested in it, but I really think my daughter, because she is exactly like me. She's just a little spitfire and a free spirit, and she's not going to let you tell her what to do. And
how old are your kids?
She's 3.5, and then my son is 10.
you got a little ways to go. I got 11-year-old twins, so it's you've got a little bit of time before your daughter really takes over everything, and
Right.
then by the 10-year-old level, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Kelly, tell us, so I'm a little confused. Is Seisel, is it a subset or a specific channel of YouTube that you're involved with, and the guy that helps you and your dad?
So Zazel has
I'm sorry.
called Sergeant Slaughterhouse, and he started that channel a few years ago, and he basically did it for himself. He wanted he could go that had everything Sergeant Slaughter, because he is such a major fan of my dad, and he wanted a place where he could go where there was everything. And his page or his channel just kind of developed from that, and he reached out and asked if I would be on his podcast, and I said sure. And so we've become friends, and he's really been instrumental in helping me with my channel, and he's been a really big help, and motivational and inspirational, and he gives me good ideas, and he's been a lot of help to me.
He hooked us up, so and he hooked us up, so
Yeah.
that counts for something right
Let's
there.
have you plug everything that you've got, whether it's wrestling related or if you have some charities and causes you'd like to plug. But let's let you plug everything before we let you go.
All right. My channel, Slaughter Daughter Official, on YouTube. You can also find me on Instagram at Slaughter Daughter Official. I'm on Facebook at Slaughter Daughter or Kelly Slaughter. And I am really, what my biggest passion is right now at this point in my life is fitness. And I'm training now for the Spartan races. I'm doing the Super on Saturday, this coming up Saturday, which is a 10K with 25 obstacles. And I'm really excited about that. But I post about journey, my training, and all of that on my Facebook and my Instagram. And I will do a whole show probably about the Super after I'm done with that. I am really passionate about fitness, and I love working out. And it's funny because 3 years ago, if you had said you're going to run a Spartan race, I would have told you were crazy. 3 years ago, I didn't like to exercise because I didn't like to be sore and I didn't like to sweat. And now if I don't get sore after workout, I'm like, did I really work out? And if I don't sweat, I'm like, why am I not sweating? I need to push myself harder.
And given that you're in Charlotte, that's probably not so hard to accomplish.
Not hard to sweat. You just go walk outside and you sweat.
Kelly, are you teaching? Any interest in teaching or motivating others as like a exercise instructor or fitness trainer stuff?
I actually have considered becoming a fitness instructor because I love the fitness classes that I take at the gym that I go to. And they've been so motivational for me. And it's nice to be able to inspire others to get out there and move their bodies, because I know what it takes to do that. And I know what it takes to go from a sedentary lifestyle to being more active. And, I lost 125 pounds. So I get it. And I've been there, and I've been there multiple times. I've always fluctuated with my weight, but I always did fad diets and things that weren't sustainable. So I really just had to make lifestyle changes to be able to be where I am now and find a love for fitness. I took a bungee fitness class, and that was fun. And I would totally, I actually thought,
How does that work?
You're hooked up to a harness and a bungee cord, and so you can bounce, and you can do like a burpee.
Wow.
But you're bouncing.
Like 100, 200 feet drop, or much less?
No, it's all inside. It's all inside, I think.
It's not like when I think bungee jumping, over the Amazon.
Yeah, no, it's I have a friend who ran a gym that had bungee cord fitness stuff, and it's you try to it's the resistance that the bungee creates for you, so you try to pull against it, and you can do certain moves and stretches that would be hard to do if you weren't being held up by the bungee cord. So I get it, but
yeah. And so you can do a burpee, which I don't know if you know what that is, but you go down into a
did
squat.
plenty of those in high school, and I'm not doing any. Well, I had a broken hip in 2016, so it's a different story. It's a different story, but I'm glad that you're able to do all this stuff, and you're making the most out of what you can. And
she's really negative, which was COVID, and turned it into a mega positive, right?
Did when in the beginning, when one of the I gained a lot of weight with my pregnancy with my daughter, and I gave myself a year of breastfeeding to basically eat whatever I wanted, which was the dumbest thing I ever could have done because I gained a ton of weight, even more than I ever had before. So I lost all of that plus a lot more. But anyway, when I found out that obesity was, a high risk factor, and that me being sedentary and not being able to figure out the right foods to eat was possibly going to keep me away from my children, I could die. And, it was scary to me in the beginning. And so I was like, I'm not going to let some virus that's named after a beer take me down. And so I started walking, and when I say that I could not walk a block, I could not walk a block. I walked 3 houses down and back the first time I went out and walked. And then the next day I went out and I walked 5 houses and back. And then the next day I went 7 houses and back. And just every day I increased how far I was going. I eventually worked up to, I'm going to do the whole loop around. And then I'm going to do 2 loops around, So I just did baby steps and started that way. And then a friend of mine asked me if I would come with her to a class, and I did. And it was the best thing that I ever did, because now I love it. And I would love to teach. I would love to open up a little space where I could offer some of these classes to people.
You could do that online, because you're obviously already motivating other people and helping others already just with your story. But you can charge for classes and monetize it and all of that right online, and you don't have to. You can do the other in person, but you can also do the other.
Right. And I'm not saying that I am an expert at any means. This is what worked for me. And
it's very inspiring.
Work for you too,
It's very inspiring. So, you've been a fantastic guest to have on the show.
Don't go anywhere, because I want to hang on when we close the show, because I want to send you some of these shots of your dad since the 70s.
Okay.
And we really appreciate having you on here. If your dad is involved in a movie and you want to help us promote it, we'd love to help you promote it. Or if you start putting classes together, we'd love to have you back on, and you can tell us about your classes. You're just a wonderful guest, and we've really enjoyed having you tonight. So
anything you ever want to promote, we'll promote.
Yes, very much so. So that's it for everyone for this week. We'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone.
どうもありがとうございまして、頑張ってください。